This is my love letter to Arquitectura, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a video is worth... Hi everyone, my name is Natalie, also known as Knitty Natty, and this is the Arquitectura shawl, or just Arquitectura. It's knit out of fingering weight yarn in Chili Knits yarn, and I'm going to tell you all about that in just a minute. But first, you can get the pattern in any of my shops below, in my Ravelry store or my Etsy shop, also on my website, knittynatty.com, starting on January 17th. 2020. Now, there's a nice little code right down there for you if you're watching this video within the first 2 weeks of the pattern release. So from Friday the 17th, 2 weeks after that, that code is good, and you can put that in to get 30% off your pattern on Ravelry or Etsy. So let's start with the inspiration behind Arquitectura. So Arquitectura means architecture in Spanish, and I think also in Portuguese. And the reason that that name was chosen is totally because of the inspiration of the design. So this design, I'm going to take it off in just a little bit to show you, but it has mosaic knitting and it has brioche knitting as its main features. And these were chosen very specifically to represent a specific architecture, Barcelonian architecture, Antoni Gaudi. And I know I'm not saying all of these names perfectly correct because English is my first language and I have an American accent, I would say. So yeah, I know I'm going to butcher them just a little bit, but I will do my best. So the main inspiration was Antoni Gaudi's buildings. He used a technique called, I'm going to put it down here, but I think it's trincadis or something like that. But basically it means lots of tiny mosaic tiles to make up these beautiful, beautiful designs. So maybe I can even include some images of some of his buildings in Barcelona, but they are just absolutely beautiful, colorful, amazing, and unique. So I went to run and grab my notebook so I could look at my notes when I first started designing this shawl, which was back in August of 2019. So I did some research on Antoni Gaudi and looked at all of his buildings and looked on the internet and kind of started to write down words that would come up pretty often. So here's my original page of designing, and some of the words that I wrote down for Gaudi was the Art Nouveau style. I wrote down checkerboard, waves, organic shapes, trincadis, I don't know how to say that, which is that surfaces covered with irregular ceramic pieces, serpentine arch, mosaic, irregular, playful, spirals, ceramic, and spire. So I kind of just went with the inspiration there, and when I started to come up with different concepts for the shawl, that's really what I was thinking of. Now you may wonder, how did you land on Gaudi as an inspiration? So let me go back a little further. When Connie of Chili Knits first contacted me to start a collaboration for a design, she told me that she would love to do a shawl and maybe something in multiple colors. And she had these beautiful basically kits put together on her website of shawl kits for 3 different colors. And so I remember I was on a summer vacation in Colorado at the time. So I was with my family, I was with my husband, and I was really excited that Connie had contacted me to do a collaboration. And of course I said, yes, I want to do it. And she was like, well, look on my site and pick out what yarn would be good. And so I was looking through her kits, and I had my husband look with me. And boy, am I glad that he looked with me, because he is actually the one who picked out this set of colors. And again, I'll talk more about the colors and stuff when I get to all of those details. But he is the one who helped me pick these colors. Now, one of the colors, this one, is called Gaudi. So that's the one that was the inspiration. That's the one that made me look up who that was, because I did not know until I started this shawl. Look up who that was and draw inspiration from that. So really it comes from Connie, because she was the one who made that beautiful color, and everything just kind of came from there. So I really started to play with that, and I think that's a good time to move into the journey next. Okay, so the journey of this shawl is actually pretty long. There were a lot of struggles and a lot of things that I learned from designing this piece. This is definitely the most complicated design I have created to date. Luckily, now it has been knit by myself and I think 5 other test knitters, and they have worked through so many kinks for you guys, so you can trust that the pattern is going to get you to the finished product. I also have lots of video support, which I will detail out in just a little bit, but getting there, this was the hardest process for me for any design I think that I've ever done. So like I said, I learned some things along the way. But after I had that inspiration moment, I started to come up with different looks that would kind of represent that architecture style. So you can see I have some things drawn here, which is funny, and you can see the date on that is August. So yeah, this has been a long time coming. Then I don't know, I guess I chose these colors because I did already have the colors, and started to sketch things out. Right away I wanted to do brioche because I thought brioche was just a good way to play with the multiple colors that I had, instead of doing stripes or a lot of color work. And then I wanted to somehow create different shapes to represent that. I should have looked this up, how to say it, because I keep talking about it. That trincadis. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Okay, I have it. It's a Catalan word, I think. I don't know if you can hear this. Trincadis. We were close, but not quite. Okay, so that was really something that I wanted to make sure was represented, that kind of mosaic style. So after that, I started to swatch, and this is my swatch for the design. It also was a good way for me to use the 3 different colors with each other and see what was going to work for the colorwork pieces, what would look good in the brioche, and see if any of the combos did not work together. So I think I started down here with brioche, and I tried, the gold and that multicolor and the blue and the multicolor, and I really liked them both. You can see there's another stitch pattern I tried in there that I did not use. I did not like it. Did some garter, and then I started playing with mosaic. And these are the 3 or some variation of them that actually ended up in the pattern themselves. So I wanted to play with triangles and squares, and then these are just I call them rays in the pattern. So I definitely wanted to use those gold and blue because they're such a good contrast to do those mosaic sections. So after the initial swatch, I started to actually design the shawl. So I had to figure out the shape and the rate of increases. I did that just first in garter stitch. That's how the shawl actually starts. And then I started to play with how to make that work with brioche and how to make that work with mosaic. And that's really where the struggles started. So I spent the better part of maybe 2 months really working those things out. This is my first design to have brioche in it and my first design to have mosaic. So I was really going for a lot of new here. So I spent a lot of time, this was my one and only swatch. I did do a lot of knitting and ripping because I already had that original yarn. And I had a deadline in mind. Originally, this pattern was going to be released at the Barcelona Knits Festival, which was in the fall. I think it was in October of 2019. Once we got closer to that deadline, I had finished the design, but the test knitters had not started yet. And so, or maybe I hadn't finished the design. Actually, I think I had not completely finished it. Everything was worked out, but I had not finished my sample yet. And I have learned that it is not a good idea to call for test knitters or crocheters until you are completely done. Actually, I would like to be completely done, plus having worn or used the product for a little while to make sure that it's going to work before I actually call for testers. So that's my new policy, having learned from this shawl, but also many more designs last year. But anyway, I was I have this deadline in mind. I know I can make it work. And once it got closer to that, I think we were 6 weeks out or so. And I knew this was going to take a long time to knit. I wanted to give my testers plenty of time to test knit it and not feel rushed. So Connie actually, again, being so amazing, she suggested that we say, you know what, let's just go ahead and change the release date for the shawl and make it in January of 2020 instead, which of course gave me almost 3 more months of time to make sure the design was ready and then send it out to test knitters. So that's what we ended up changing it to, which has meant you guys have had to wait extra long for it, but it did make sure that the design was totally ready and done for you guys. So back to actually working on designing it. Figuring out how to do increases in brioche was I guess I did the mosaic section first. That wasn't too bad because mosaic is pretty much garter knitting. I just had to make sure my cute little triangles and my cute little squares fit into that. I also had to figure out a way not to make the floats go across here, so you'll see that laid out in the pattern. And then the brioche was what gave me the most trouble. So I did a lot of what I'm going to call virtual knitting, which is basically coloring in cells on an Excel spreadsheet and doing like the increases, kind of charting it out so that I could make sure that things would work. Now, unintentionally, I sort of created a different sort of brioche increase when making the shawl. Like I said, this is my first brioche design, and I had not done brioche increases before. So I made sure that I did my research and looked up how to do a brioche increase. But I actually misinterpreted the second pass on the brioche increase and ended up inventing one of my own. Now, it is not that different from a bark yarn over bark, which is basically a 2-stitch brioche increase. Instead, this is a 1-stitch brioche increase, and it starts the same. You just treat the stitches differently on that row back, and I've got a video for that that I will make sure all those video tutorials are linked below too, so you can see all the tutorials that help you with this pattern. So it's really not complicated. It's just a new way to do a brioche increase. So the great thing about this way to do a brioche increase is that you can stick with the traditional increase rate of, a center spine and stitches on the side of your shawl. So it's actually a really, really useful thing. You don't have to do increases and then decreases to offset the stitches that you've increased. So it actually works out really, really great. But I had to decide, do I want to rip things back and do the traditional increase that's the right way? Or do I want to make sure I can find a way to explain how to do this to other people so that they can also use it? Like, basically, is it innovative or is it wrong? And so I decided to stick with it. I decided, you know what, maybe it is innovative, maybe it's useful. I can definitely explain how to do it to people. And my test knitters, I don't think they had an issue actually going through it. Maybe one time they were like, wait, and then they read through the instructions and saw the video, and they were totally fine doing it. So yeah, it has kind of some new techniques, some rule-breaking techniques in it, but it was a journey for sure. Luckily, I had some really, really great test knitters, very, very intelligent, but some of them had never done brioche and never done mosaic before. I had the gamut. So I had some people who had done both. I had at least one person who had not done either mosaic or brioche, and then a couple people who had done one or the other. So I feel like that's a really good way to have testers, is people who, when people are going to knit this pattern, they might not have done mosaic one or the other or brioche knitting. So I want to make sure that it is still possible, if you have not done those techniques before, to still be able to knit Arquitectura. Okay, so now let's talk about how to wear Arquitectura. So it is a basic triangle, but it is a very deep triangle. So actually, let me see what the actual dimensions are on it. And in the next section, we're also going to go through a lot of those other details, so stay tuned. I am going to get to those too. So the actual dimensions on it are about 65 inches from tip to tip, which is a really good length that will definitely go around and stay on, and then about 30 inches deep. So it is a deep shawl. So I'm gonna cut to another video to kind of show you me wearing it so that I don't bump my microphone. But basically you can wear it like a typical triangle like scarf. So the triangle in the front, wrap the two tails around so that they also hang beside you. That's my favorite way to wear it for sure. You can kind of fluff up the middle to get it to look nice, make sure the sides are all around. Another thing you can do is take those tails and actually tuck them underneath the triangle. If you need to, you can tie them. That just kind of gives it like a cleaner look if you don't like those tails and helps it to stay on. Now you can also wear it, you know, basic granny like shawl style around your shoulders. It is long enough that it will hang down and it should stay over your shoulders. So that's just a few different ways that you can wear it. Just in case you weren't able to like see all of it, here it is all laid out. So let's kind of look at each little section here. So you have three colors, and I do suggest you having one that is variegated, or you can have three solids, but probably just one that is variegated, and then two solids that are definitely going to contrast for these mosaic sections. So I would start maybe with your variegated and then pick two colors that you like that are going to go with it. So the shawl starts here at the top with an I-cord tab cast on, and then it has a small little garter section to get you set up. The next is a mosaic section with these triangles. Then you move into a large brioche section. And if you look closely, the color that is sort of the knit stitches that is dominant flips. So you can see the variegated, and then it's the gold, and then it's the variegated again. And of course, the back of that is the opposite. Then you move into another mosaic section with these squares, and then you do the same brioche section except with your other contrasting color. So you would do that same little flip there. And then you end with a really tiny little mosaic section and an I-cord bind off, which just kind of ties everything together because this I-cord, this applied I-cord edge does run throughout. Now, there's one thing that I want you to know about this shawl that is something to keep in mind. The mosaic sections can be difficult to keep loose. This triangular one, it's not too bad. You can kind of keep it pretty loose, but this square one is very difficult to keep loose. So you need to pay close attention to it is all you need to do. So when you are knitting this, you will see that triangle section, if I just pick it up by the triangle section, see how my brioche sort of dips like this. It's totally okay. That's totally what's going to happen. It's just the nature of this being much tighter than those brioche sections. But I want you to know that going in, that is normal and that is something that will happen. What you can do when you block it, I've got instructions. You kind of start with this tight section here. You get it wet blocked, you get all stretched out nicely, you lay it out flat, and then you ease your other sections into a triangle to match this tight one. You don't ever want to pull and stretch on your brioche sections in Arquitectura because they're already plenty loose. Where you want to work is these tighter mosaic section. So I just want you to know that going in, that is something that will happen. That will be your tightest section of your shawl. But don't worry, it still all works out into a nice triangle that's totally wearable and is very beautiful. So let's go ahead and dive into those details next. So this shawl requires 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn in 3 different colors. You can do 3 different solids, or you can do what I did and have a variegated yarn and then 2 solid yarns or semi-solid yarns. So here are my 3 yarns here. What I would suggest is picking your variegated first and then pick 2 colors that are going to look good with it, but also work for those contrasting mosaic sections. You want to make sure the 2 colors that you choose to be in the mosaic sections will definitely stand out. And you can do that by taking a picture and turning it actually black and white and seeing if those colors will contrast with each other. That's very important. You can also, once you have your colors, you can knit up a little swatch. My triangle mosaic chart is available in the video, and so you can really make sure before you start that those are going to work. So my 3 colors here, and these yarns are all chili knits, Chili Knits yarn, and we collaborated together for this pattern. So she provided the yarn, the beautiful yarn for me. And this is her fingering base. It is superwash merino 4-ply, and it is 438 yards. And then I think one of the other colors is her another base, an 85-15, but also 438 yards. So that'll give you a good idea of what you need. So of course my main color here that started it all, there we go, is Gouty. And then my other colors, I had the gold, which is Gold Digger. And then I had the blue, which I think I mispronounced the whole time, but I think it's Caribe. I don't know, like Caribbean maybe. But anyway, like I said, my husband helped pick that kit. Connie is so good at putting colors together. So she's gonna be at Vogue Knitting Live in New York with her version of the shawl. She picked amazing colors for her version. I remember that there's like a beautiful lilac purple. She's just so good at putting colors together. So if you want to use her yarn and you're not at Vogue Knitting Live, she does sell her yarn through her website. And I'm sure if you contacted her and said, hey, I want to put together 3 colors for Arquitectura, can you help me? She's gonna do a beautiful, beautiful job. So definitely take advantage of her expertise on that. I would have never ever put these 3 colors together. This was definitely out of my comfort zone. You know, my comfort zone is like pink and gray and like sometimes light blue. So I would never ever have done these 3 colors, but how good do they look together? So I'm really happy to have had somebody else, you know, kind of guide me in the right direction there. Okay, so as far as needle size, myself and many of my testers used a US size 5, which is 3.75 millimeters. You do need a longer circular needle in order to accommodate the shawl once it gets very, very long. It does start at the top and go down to the bottom. So a 40-inch is what I'm suggesting, or you can be like me and try to use the smallest length cord. I think I only went to a 32 for like as long as possible. So up to you on that, of course. You'll also need, you know, a darning needle. You'll need some stitch markers, and a removable stitch marker to mark the right side is really helpful at the beginning. As far as gauge goes, you will need to make sure to test your gauge in garter stitch. This is very important because you don't want to run out of yarn with a shawl. This color, this like kind of second contrasting color, I had the most left over, but my other 2 colors, the main color and the blue, only had about, I don't know, I think less than 20 grams left. So you want to make sure you're close on the gauge, err on the side of smaller if you're not sure, because with any kind of like superwash wool, it's going to stretch. So make sure you are careful with your gauge. And that gauge is 24 stitches over 4 inches in garter stitch. So about, what is that? 6 stitches per inch in garter. And I give you suggestions on how to gauge swatch as well. Okay, let's talk about special stitches in this, in the Arquitectura shawl. So I've got videos for each one of these that are public on my YouTube channel. They will be linked in the description box, and I maybe possibly can link them up here. I will try to do my best. But the first special stitch is going to be this I-cord tab cast on. So the entire shawl has an applied I-cord edge, and in order to make that look really nice at the beginning, you can do an I-cord tab cast on with a provisional, I-cord tab with a provisional cast on, and it just makes a really nice smooth edge. Yes, it's a little finicky, but don't worry, I have a video for you. I did it about 20 times and then recorded the video, so hopefully it is very clear for you. But if you have to do it a couple times to start, don't worry, that's totally normal. There's garter stitch in this shawl, which is of course pretty basic. So there's also increases and decreases, and an applied I-cord edge. The other special stitches that I have made videos for are mosaic. So in the mosaic, it's mosaic knitting for rule breakers, because we are going to go, instead of just having 3 stitches in each color, there are going to be times when you have 5 stitches in each color, which is why it's important to practice that and to have really, really loose floats on the back. So I guess we can talk about mosaic knitting because I haven't said that yet. So mosaic knitting is a really cool technique that looks basically like color work, except that you're not having to hold, like for this one, gold and blue at the same time. You're gonna work a row with just gold and you're gonna slip all of the stitches that are blue. Then you're gonna come back and do the same thing. Only work the gold stitches and slip all of the blue stitches. Every time you slip a stitch, you're gonna be slipping that stitch or carrying that yarn on the wrong side. So what it does is it creates a lot of floats here. And those floats are what we have to make sure are loose, because you can see it's kind of tight. It's a little rigid. That's why those sections are small. They do take a lot of time, so we want them to be small anyway, but also because they're very rigid. Here's that square section, and you can see that's pretty snug, so you have to be really careful, and I would definitely suggest practicing that. But it's not actually hard to execute because you only have to hold one color at a time. So the mosaic knitting video does have this chart in there for you to practice without any increasing or decreasing, so that you can make sure you have that down. The other two videos are all for brioche knitting. So I've got a basic brioche stitches video, which is not only good for Arquitectura, but if you're doing any kind of brioche pattern, it's a really quick video that just goes over the 4 basic stitches, bark, burp, which are brioche knit, brioche purl, and then their yarn over slip equivalents that go with them. So that's a really good one for anytime you're doing brioche. And then of course, how to do the brioche increases. So there's brioche increases all along the edge there. In a normal, the regular brioche increase, you would see like basically from one stitch you would see a branch, and so that's what's different about this design. It's a 1 stitch brioche increase. The increases also go along the center spine of the shawl there, but you can see they still look really nice and tidy even though they're just that 1 stitch increase. So that's the second brioche video is 1 stitch brioche increase. So 4 videos, they're all public on my YouTube channel. You can go practice them to make sure you feel comfortable with them before you even get this shawl pattern, and just make sure you know that you're good to go. So when you get the Arquitectura pattern, you're actually going to get several PDFs in one. There are 2 versions of the pattern itself. There is a written version that is about, I don't know, it's a little longer. It's maybe like 10 pages because all of the instructions are written out. All of the instructions for how to do the mosaic and the brioche, everything is written out. Then there is a condensed PDF pattern that basically just has it has the same instructions, but instead of writing out the brioche and this, you have charts for the brioche and the mosaic. So I can kind of show you really briefly what those look like. You don't have to buy separate things to get those, but like this, for example, is the brioche chart. It's sort of my own made up thing that I have made my own little symbols and stuff for. So you might find that useful, or it might be like a little too much, and so you can use the written version. So you'll have written version, the condensed instructions, a whole set of charts so you can use them in combination, which is usually what I end up doing. I refer to written instructions, but like to see a chart because I can see it all mapped out. And then the other thing that I created, this is kind of an idea that came from some of the other shawls that I have made and designed, is a whole stitch count guide. So I can pull that up real quick to show you. But in the instructions themselves, I usually just give stitch counts for like the ends of sections, but sometimes you need, a stitch count by row or by repeat. And so the stitch count guide literally has a stitch count for every repeat, every row of the whole shawl in one nice little 1-pager there. So all of those PDFs are going to be included when you get the pattern, whether it's on Etsy or Ravelry or my website. So you can be assured that everything is going to be there to help you, what am I trying to say? To make sure that this pattern is, completely vetted for you and ready to go. Okay, that is everything. Make sure if you are watching this within those first 2 weeks that you use the code at the beginning of the video to go get 30% off your Arquitectura pattern. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am signing off my love letter to Arquitectura. Love and stitches, Knitty Natty.